third edition of ICT Diary. My name is Sakina Asman and I will be your host. Today's topic we are discussing about data, gender and statistics, and I'm joined here by a gentleman by the name Festus. Festus, could you kindly just introduce yourself and tell us what data in simple terms means and why is gender data and statistics is important and why is it critical and in the economic development?
Thank you so much, Sakina. My name is Festus Odingo and I'm Data Research and Learning Lead at the Forum. And as a forum, we conduct a number of activities, basically stretching from data and moves to issues of data pertaining to voluntary national reporting. We work on issues around Generation Equality Forum, and as well as strengthening CSOs as an accountability platform. Speaking about data, data in simple terms means raw information. Statistics is actually now an accomplished or harnessing of that raw information to speak to issues of policy and to orientate a number of actions that the governments or even non-state actors undertake. Data is quite important in that perspective, in the sense that it's some kind of direction orientation. It offers some kind of roadmap in terms of resources, in terms of policies. You know where you want to put your resources, then you need to tap into data, you need to tap into statistics, because it's going to show you that this is what I have and this is where I'm supposed to go. It's just like if I would take an analogy, you're walking and you don't know where you're going to. So equality of data would derive you to a better destination. And at some point, having no data is better than having bad data, because if you have no data, then you'd be cautious in arriving at a destination. But if you have a bad data, you'd be ignorantly trying to get somewhere. So
just to cut you short, they say that normal people like us, we can look at data and see that we can just interpret it as it is, but any misinterpretation of the data can misinform. And there is a famous data quote by a gentleman by the name Edwards, and it says, "In God we trust, but all others should bring data." So how practical is this quote when it comes to planning and budgeting at the national and the county level when involving data and gender statistics?
That brings me to data interpretation. How do I interpret the kind of information that I've gotten from different sectors? The number of challenges, I would say, that has been, I think, a hinder to getting to a stage where I would say that this data is appropriate for us as an organization or as a county to tap into it, thereby showing us the right direction on whatever we want to do, and even showing where our needs are and where to put the finances. That is where it is, because if you have the right data, in that case, then you'd know how much to put where. So speaking about women, how do I interpret data to speak to a certain segment of the population? If I want, for instance, to address women who are actually actively involved in agriculture, then I would need to look for data that informs issues around agriculture. But then that data also has to capture a spectrum of other sectors, because there's that interlinkages within those data sets. Now, the only problem is that when you'd misinterpret data if you don't have the capability or you don't have the right methods within you or the skills that are required. And that is where the counties also suffer, because sometimes you don't have monitoring and evaluation desks. And the ministries are also working on a standalone basis. So you don't have some kind of a process that harness information in a way that now when you want to interpret it, it speaks what the county or even the national government wants.
Festus, could you kindly just explain to us if national and a subnational institution regularly collect gender disaggregated data, and why is it important when it comes to economic development of a country?
That's a key question, and you've rightly so asked it, because it takes me to speak about a number of things. I'll start by, for instance, the Statistical Act of 2006, which now establishes how statistics is supposed to be produced in Kenya. And I think that is one core document that governs the National Statistical Office, and in our case, that is the Kenya National the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. It establishes also the role and duties of a number of persons within that entity, including the Director General. And if you look at, for instance, the first schedule in that document, it speaks broadly on how statistics would be produced, how it would be analyzed, how it would be actually published and disseminated. If you look at the fourth schedule, then it speaks to the fundamental principle of official statistics, and it gives a bare minimum on what levels of disaggregation should be. And it mentions sex, it mentions gender, it mentions geographical region, ethnic groups that you belong to, the religion, and sometimes it would even require you to actually disaggregate by your socio-professional activity that you undertake, so that we would be able. But even before we get there, why do we talk about disaggregation? Because I would want to know what segment of the community suffers what kind of deprivation. I would be a woman, or I would be youth, but I would intentionally mention that I would be a PWD, a person living with a disability, who actually does not have access to some job. I'm speaking to, for instance, SDG number 8 on decent work, and you are probably have not maybe transitioned to secondary school. So if I disaggregate, then I'll be able to classify and know where the need is, so that when I'm designing policies, I would say that this is what is missing for a certain person, and this is what we're supposed to do. Disaggregation is important. When you go to the counties, what is missing at the county is, first of all, having those desks, and we had mentioned that, having data desks or M&E desks. I would mention that at the national level, we have what we call the National Integrated Monitoring Evaluation Systems. By extrapolation, that also exists at the county, the SIMS, but in paper. They have those steer committees that have been created to actually input into those. But it's not, we don't see it happening. Another thing is that different ministries also produce data in pockets, but we don't have some kind of centralization, leave alone even disaggregation, because that is, it goes to a different level. If we can harness that data, but then even before we do that, there are prior methodologies that needs to be upgraded or put in place, so that when you disaggregate, you know you want this kind of data, and it should be harmonized across all the ministries and all actors within the county, so that when you collect that data, we know it's going to inform a certain, I always speak about data passionately, because if you collect data and you don't analyze that data, you're wasting resources. And then two, if you collect data and you misinterpret again that data, you're misplacing resources and so everything ends in finances again. Yeah.
All right. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're talking about the SDG number 5, that is gender equality. See you next.
CIO Africa presents the Cloud and Security Summit from 17th to 18th of March 2022. Key trends to be discussed on cloud and security include cloud migration strategies, data ops and cloud, AI for cloud intelligence, securing your cloud, cloud security in a hybrid working world. Join Africa's top cloud and security minds. Register today.
Welcome back. We are discussing data and gender statistics matters. And before we went on a break, we were discussing on the SDGs. And Festus in the forum, the SDG Kenya forum, when you compare, we talk about data, and we're talking about the SDGs and achieving the Vision 2030. How far are we when it in terms in Kenya? How far is Kenya when it comes to achieving the SDG goals, and what is the forum doing towards achieving maybe gender inequality, and how do we use the data to achieve the SDG goals?
We have in the global indicators framework, we have 231 indicators that are reported on across the 17 goals. Kenya, as a government, reports on 131 goals. Across the 200 they report on 131 indicators for the 17 goals. But then, across the 17 goals again, in the 231 indicators, there are 80 gender-related indicators. Kenya reports on a number of them. There's a recent report on gender assessment that just came out, and the SDGs report. And they reported actually on 42 of such indicators. 26 actually were published. The SDG 5 goal has 14 indicators. And in a way, and in a sense, it's cross-cutting. If I don't even speak about gender, just speaking about the SDGs, in Kenya we have what we call the Interagency Technical Working Group, chaired and co-chaired by the government, the private sector, SDGs Kenya Forum representing the CSOs, and there was the establishment of a steer committee that offers work as a secretariat. There are lots of activities that actually have been undertaken. One that is major, and I think KNCCI also we're looking forward to participate, is the multi-stakeholder engagement that happens at the end of every year, where we appreciate the implementation of SDGs in Kenya. And today we are speaking about localization, ownership, and domestication of SDGs, even up to the county level. From the CSO's perspective, there are a number of things that have been done, and every CSO's, every activity they do today, we try and align those activities to SDGs. So you'd find that such activities actually are reported into. As a forum, we have goal groups, and each and every goal has 2 leads. So goal group 1, when you're talking about poverty issues, there are 2 entities. If you're talking about zero hunger, there are 2 entities. If you're talking about health, goal 3, there are 2 entities. If you're talking about education, 2 entities. If you're talking about SDG 5 on gender equality, there are 2 entities there. So there's a process where these activities are reported. We've had challenges before because most of these organizations were reporting at target levels, but now we've seen advancements where these organizations are now reporting by indicators level, and there's been quite a tremendous advancements in gender. There's lots of work that is taking place in gender, but again, we are not yet there yet, but we hope that in the near future, when it takes work from different stakeholders, then we know that we'll be moving towards the same direction. There are a few things I'd mention, especially pertaining to SDG 5. I would mention Kenya Demographic Health Service, the KDHS. The last we had dates to 2014, and it mentions there that the level of prevalence for FGM, the female genital mutilation or CAT, is still pegged at 21%. And with COVID entering, it has actually exacerbated other issues that we actually were not anticipating. And so you find that FGM has also taken a different direction, because we now experience the cross-border FGM, because certainly there are stringent laws that we have on the land that now prohibits that. And then guys now are moving across the border to do it the other side. Kind of, they are hiding the face of FGM. But then the government is also working quite tremendously with the development and establishment of the anti-FGM board. So there are a number of things that needs to be done. But then again, other critique could be on periodicity. We've had the last KDHS in 2014, and we are now moving into, I don't know, the 6th or 7th year. So it means that we are, on timeliness, actually, we are actually off target. But right now, I know KNBS is running the 2022 DHS. Problem is that they're doing it at a point where we are running into electioneering period. So we're just praying and hoping that it doesn't really gear us off, because DHS normally, the survey takes about 6 months. So it's starting like end of this month, and it's going to flow for the next 6 months, and it falls right in the middle of elections. So those are some of the drawbacks that I think might hinder us achieving the Agenda 2030. We're also in the phase of, conceiving MTP4, the medium-term plan form, or what we term now the third generation. We're just shifting now from MTP3, and it's directly aligned to Vision 2030 and even to the Sustainable Development Goals. I believe as a country, and even as non-state actors, we've moved greatly, but there's still efforts that needs to be, I think there are lots of collaboration and partnership that needs to be brought together. We need to pool funds. There's that gap that still exists. How do we finance SDGs to ensure that we actually achieve them? And that takes citizenry action. It takes our own action to make sure we move towards that to achieving that agenda that is so glorious for us.
You're talking about, you mentioned the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I'm aware that you entered into partnership with the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce to improve on women economic empowerment. And you've mentioned that achieving the Vision 2030 is a combined effort. So how do you think, or what do you think that, what can private sector, and because the government cannot do it alone, so private sectors, how do they come in and ensure that? Because to my understanding, private sectors organization, most of them, they have a backlog and database of SMEs, women, all sectors of any sector or agribusiness, name it, they have their members are there. How do they play a role when it comes to maintaining this data and ensuring that this vision is achieved?
That's good. The different, in Kenya today, there are different players in terms of where we want to be. I would mention a report that tracks women in terms of agricultural production and all that. And I think that was on gender assessment again. And you'd find that when you talk about average income for small-scale producers, for women, it's about 6,679. And for men is about 11,422 thereabout. I think the national average is slightly higher. And you find these differences, and it makes me ask questions. Why do we have differentials in production? If we are on the same unit of production, why do we have those differentials? And there are different schools of thoughts and that would actually underscore that. Thing is, women suffer differently compared to men. Women, we always speak about the triple role of women, their role in the community as caregivers, their productive role now engaged in productive roles within the society, whether they're practicing IGAs, the income generating activities, and even their reproductive role as a mother, you know. So that hinders you a lot in participating fully into contributing meaningfully to the GDP. Men probably might not suffer the same. And so that is just one argument. We have cultural norms that are also leveraged on them. When I'm a woman and probably have lost my husband, I'm called a widow. It goes back to disaggregation. So if I'm a widow, there are those cultural norms that actually also hinder women from accessing factors of production. And for instance, land, I might not really be able to contribute to the GDP in that perspective. So there are those factors that actually hinder. If I speak about the private sector, and I come back to your question, private sector also plays a key role. And if we are talking about micro, small, and medium enterprises, in Kenya, I think 90% of all business establishments are MSMEs. MSMEs today in Kenya actually employs 84% of the total workforce. And it also, by extrapolation, actually, it contributes to 28.5% of the GDP. It's very key because if we point in case, if we put ourselves at the global level, Singapore contributes 50%. Talking about MSMEs, UK 50%, Germany 75%. It means we have a potential to grow towards that direction. But then again, what is astonishing is that 79% of those MSMEs are unlicensed. Now, if you have that huge percentage that is unlicensed, and then you again underscore that 61% of those unlicensed are women-led. Only 32% licensed are women-owned. If I would give you another statistics, is that 46% of all those MSMEs actually closed down, you know, before 1 year. About 80%, you know, wind up before reaching 5 years. But again, 55% of those are women-led. What are we trying to say? That there's one common denominator in talking about women, especially in businesses. Most of them are women-owned. They are operating in an informal environment, or they are operating informally. And then the issues of funds, operating funds actually are not there. They have shortages of those funds. Definitely they'll close down. I'm not even speaking about COVID. So what role as a government can we play? What role as a private sector do we play, and other actors in this space to bring women together? When you talk about women, I'm also talking about the youth, because you have women youths and you also have women PWDs. The intersectionality is very key. So I think as a government, we need to again use data to design policies and put money where need is.
Just explain to the public, like in Kenya, what kind of data are we using? Is it based on the big data system? And is there need to have the citizen-generated data?
We have several data sources in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Probably, I would mention that we have a data ecosystem that brings everybody, every data producer, user, and even suppliers. From the data ecosystem, we have what we call the National Statistical System. We've redone a redefinition of National Statistical System. We've expanded it to, include different data producers. Initially, that unit has been coordinated by the National Statistical Office, in our case, KNBS. And we have lots of data coming from administrative avenues, what we call the administrative data. We have the surveys within our system. We have the censuses that have been there. But then we have other sources. Now, these are what we call the traditional data sources. But then we have alternative data sources, and I would mention citizen-generated data. Some say citizen science. We also have the big data that you probably collect from big entities like Safaricom, for instance. When we get you data from supermarkets where you do your shopping, that's a form of big data. If you go to petrol stations, for instance, to do your fueling, that's a form of big data as well. But then the citizen-generated data is data that is mostly produced by non-state actors. And in this case, the CSOs, they produce it while undertaking their day-to-day activities and probably responding to programs and projects actually that they're undertaking. Kenya as a country, and we commend the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and especially led by the DG, that we've given some sense of direction into how to fill data gaps. How do you fill data gaps? We want to cut on costs of conducting a number of surveys, and to avoid duplication, we would definitely tap into data that exists. But to harness this data is not official and cannot be used for official reporting, cannot be used as official statistics. So we went ahead to create guidelines as CSOs that could be subjected to different CSO entity to appreciate the kind of data that they produce. When you say that you produce data and the methodology, probably you mentioned a purposive sampling, we believe it's not a scientific method of producing data. So in that case, for you to produce data scientifically so that we can actually authenticate it as scientific and for official use and reporting, then we need a number of criteria. We would actually subject it to issues of timeliness of that data, methodological soundness, interpretability, and a number of criteria. So we've gone ahead to do that. We've done what we call the score allocation matrix to see how a CSO's data could actually be categorized, whether official or not official. Right now, there's been the creation and development of the Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework, what we call the KSCAF, which very soon will be launched. And the criteria, or the CGD guidelines and criteria, would be actually annexed in that document. There is an inventorying process that is taking place of CSO's data that is going to be used to create a minimum threshold that any data that is produced is supposed to meet before we actually accept it. So we've actually gone different latitudes, and I think the conversation is good, and we've created good partnership and feel between the National Statistical Office and different entities. And I would mention organizations like JPSDD, I'd mentioned UN Women, SDGs Kenya Forum. We've actually worked together with KNBS to see, and I would never fail to mention Paris 21, who is also pushing towards that direction, to see that we actually tap into that data. It's going to fill data gaps that exist. If I'm working on a certain project and I'm reporting, and I see that there's a CSO actually that has produced quality data on a certain aspect that I don't have, then I'll tap into that, you see. And so I'll cut cost for actually going to collect that data because they've done it on their part. So that's, I think, where the conversation is, and it's a good direction.
We've come to the end of our today's show, and thank you for watching. If you'd wish to appear or be our next guest on the show, you can contact us through the mobile number provided. We can also engage further through our social media handles. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Have a good day.